Poland calls Zelensky's participation in Alaska meeting best decision. Ukraine braces for new Russian propaganda wave before Trump-Putin meeting. And how Ukrainian ambassador to US says Trump to act from position of strength in talks with Putin. The latest news next. The Kremlin is trying to use the summit in Alaska not to conduct meaningful peace negotiations, but to drive a wedge between the United States and Europe, the American Institute for the Study of War reports. Experts drew attention to recent messages from Russian leaders indicating Moscow's attempts to pit Europe against the United States. For example, on Sunday, August 10th, Russian Security Council Deputy Chairperson Dmitry Medvedev wrote on his Telegram channel that Europe is allegedly trying to prevent the United States from helping stop the war in Ukraine. Russian Liberal Democratic Party head Leonid Slutsky said that European countries pursue anti-Russian policies and are trying to prevent a quick, peaceful settlement in Ukraine. Russian political scientist Sergei Markov told the Washington Post on August 10th that Russia's main interest at the Alaska summit is to portray Ukraine and Europe as obstacles to peace. According to him, Russia refuses to take any steps back, and the only compromise it is ready to consider is stopping hostilities while retaining control over Odessa and Kharkiv regions, as well as Kherson and Zaporizhia. Markov expressed hope that Trump would realize that the main reason for the war is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and the second reason is European leaders, but not Russia. Kremlin's insidious plan, according to RSW analysts, European and Ukrainian officials, including Zelensky, have consistently demonstrated readiness to advance and conduct good faith negotiations, as well as to conclude meaningful ceasefire agreements to promote a peace initiative. At the same time, Russia has consistently rejected these efforts, seeking gradual success on the battlefield and additional concessions from Ukraine and the West. Experts are convinced that the Kremlin has long sought to weaken unity between the United States, Europe, and Ukraine. This is part of a broader campaign aimed at deterring for the Western support for Kiev and diverting attention from Russia's own intransigence in the peace process and unwillingness to compromise on Putin's initial demands. ISW continues to assess that Russia remains steadfast in its long-standing war objectives, preventing Ukraine from joining NATO, changing the government in favor of a pro-Russian puppet regime, and demilitarizing Ukraine, all of which would amount to the country's full capitulation. Russia will very likely violate and weaponize any future ceasefire agreements in Ukraine while blaming Ukraine for the violations, as it repeatedly did in spring 2025, the analysts believe. Russia-US summit in Alaska. US President Donald Trump plans to meet Russian dictator Vladimir Putin on August 15th in Alaska to discuss options for ending the war in Ukraine and achieving long-term peace. The American leader did not rule out that, following the talks, the parties might have to cede part of their territories. However, President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected the possibility of officially transferring Ukrainian territories to the aggressor's control. Ukraine is preparing for another wave of activation of Russian propaganda aimed at destabilizing internal and international support in the context of negotiations, military exchanges, and important state dates, according to the Center for Countering Disinformation. Manipulations around the negotiation process and the role of Ukraine. Before and after the planned meeting of US President Donald Trump and dictator Vladimir Putin in Alaska, Russian propagandists will intensify campaigns to discredit Ukraine as a subject of negotiations. The main messages are alleged unwillingness of Kiev to achieve peace, blocking of the process, putting forward unrealistic demands, as well as emphasizing Ukrainians' dependence on Russia and the US in deciding its fate. They will especially insist on the idea that only Moscow and Washington have control over European security, and that Europe allegedly is incapable of acting independently. This is part of an attempt to destroy international solidarity and sow division between Kiev, Washington, and the European Union. Disinformation about prisoner exchanges. Against the backdrop of a pause in real exchanges, the enemy is launching fakes about the selective approach of Ukraine to the release of prisoners of war, alleged refusal to take back its own, and non-transparency of negotiations. Staged appeals and manipulative interviews will be spread, aimed at causing emotional resonance among the families of prisoners and putting pressure on the Ukrainian authorities. Information threat from Belarus. Against the backdrop of preparations for the strategic exercises Zapad 2025, Russia and Belarus are preparing information injections about an alleged build-up of forces near Ukrainians' borders, the threat of a new invasion from the north. Despite the absence of real changes at the border, such messages are intended to create an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty among the Ukrainian population. Activation of propaganda. Russian propagandists plan to actively discredit Ukrainian statehood, national symbols, and the right to independence. Among the tools are pseudo-historical narratives about the artificiality of Ukraine, the collapse of a single people, and the absence of a real state tradition. Rumors about missile strikes and terrorist attacks are also expected to be spread to sow panic among citizens. Information operations on the eve of the Day of Remembrance of defenders of Ukraine. Using the tragic events of 2014, in particular Ilovaisk, Kremlin propagandists will try to demoralize Ukrainian society, shifting responsibility for losses to the Ukrainian command while silencing Russia's aggression. Special attention will be paid to social networks, particularly TikTok, to influence the youth audience. Manipulations around the anniversary of the killing of Daria Dugina. Russia will try to present Dugina as a victim of Ukrainian terrorism and act as the injured party, emphasizing alleged attacks on civilians. Memorial events will be actively covered to form an international image of Ukraine as a radical regime. Russian information attacks on Moldova ahead of elections. On the eve of the parliamentary elections in Moldova, September 28th, the Kremlin will intensify propaganda aimed at discrediting the pro-European authorities, undermining trust in the electoral process, and dividing the diaspora. The main focus will be on the topic of political prisoners and repression against pro-Russian forces. Propaganda campaigns around the SCO summit. Russia will try to use the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit and Putin's visit to China to demonstrate alleged geopolitical strength and support from Asian countries. This is meant to undermine faith in Western support for Ukraine and create the impression of a shift in the world course in favor of Moscow. Russian fakes on August 3rd. The Center for Countering Disinformation debunked Russian fakes about Ukraine allegedly not taking its citizens from neutral territories, in particular prisoners of war and former convicts. In addition, the Russian regime plans to continue a disinformation campaign to discredit the process of exchange with Ukraine. The defense forces have relevant information. Ukrainian ambassador to the US Oksana Markarova is confident that the US will act from a position of strength in talks with Russia and that a joint solution to end the war will eventually be found, according to her interview with CBS News.
The front line in east and south of Ukraine is the front line between evil and good. And the question is, when that front line is going to be? Is it going to be on our territory? Is it going to be on our borders? Or is it going to be in Europe and everywhere, where it will affect Europe, the US and other? I am confident that the US will be coming from the position of strength, peace through strength, and that will allow us, together, to find a solution to stop Russia's aggression.
Commenting on the upcoming meeting between US President Donald Trump and Kremlin dictator Vladimir Putin, the diplomat said Ukraine really is hopeful that this push from President Trump and achieve excellent results. She also reminded that Ukraine has agreed to any type of ceasefire, whether full or partial.
So yes, we want Putin to stop. And we really are hopeful that this push from President Trump and the sanction packages which are on the table and secondary sanctions which are already implemented against those who help Russia will convince President Putin that this is time for him to finally stop his aggression.
Markarova added that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been committed to peace from the first day of Russia's aggression and is ready to promote the peace agenda anywhere. If needed, he will be present at meetings. The diplomat noted that Ukraine is ready to discuss how to end the war, but a ceasefire has always been an important step to stop the killings, and let's get to diplomacy. She also stressed that it was Russia that attacked Ukraine, illegally seizing Crimea and other territories. At the same time, she warned against ideas of buffer zones or dividing Ukraine, calling them outdated concepts of the last century. Separately on Facebook, Markarova wrote that for the first time in years of active interviews in the US, I brought the Constitution of Ukraine to the studio, which contains the answer to questions about Ukrainian territories. In the current situation, inviting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska would be the best decision. This was stated by Polish Deputy Prime Minister and Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, according to PAP.
I believe President Zelensky will be invited. Today, there is information about the possibility of his participation in the meeting between President Trump and Putin. That would be the best decision, and I believe it will happen, said the defense minister. Kosiniak-Kamysz added that the goal of the Western world, led by the United States, is to achieve a just and lasting peace.
Quote, last week, I had the opportunity to speak with President Trump's closest advisors who spoke of his determination to achieve his goal, making peace. Poland will do everything to make such a just peace a reality, the defense minister stressed. The official noted that a ceasefire agreement with Zelensky's participation is now closer than ever before. In his view, if this happens on August 15th, the day of victory over the Bolsheviks in the 1920 Battle of Warsaw, it would be the best gift for this part of the world and the future of the region. Kosiniak-Kamysz also stated that Poland is ready to support allies in a possible peacekeeping mission in Ukraine by providing logistical and infrastructure support. That's all for today. Thanks for watching this video. Support Ukraine, like and subscribe.